Winter didn't wait its turn that year. It came early and without mercy. It laid itself over the Wyoming hills like a bitter bridal veil, erasing trails, boot prints, and every faint cry the land might have remembered. Two doves lay frozen on the fence rail, beaks tucked into each other like they'd hoped warmth could be shared. Lena Grace Hartley paused when she saw them, her shawl clutched close, boots cracking through the brittle ice on her way to the chicken coop. The hens had stopped laying days ago. Not much kept breathing when the wind howled like that. Lena was 22, slight of build, with copper-threaded hair that she kept braided to keep from catching in the stove flames. Her eyes were prairie-colored, the exact shade between wheat and storm. She'd come from West Texas on a wagon with a worn hymn book and hands used to work. She never raised her voice, not out of fear, but because she'd learned the cost of being heard. She'd married Jude Hartley 6 months earlier, a man with shoulders like split cedar and a heart he didn't quite know how to show. His touch was gentler than his jawline suggested, and when he cupped her face after saying "I do," she believed, for a breathless moment, that peace had come at last. But peace is not a permanent thing in a household where the walls still mourn a husband buried 5 winters ago. Evelyn Hartley, Jude's mother, had never approved. Not of Lena's threadbare dresses, nor her silence, nor the way she looked at Jude as if she saw something more than cattle and land. Evelyn was tall and rigid, a woman whose words could cut flesh clean without ever rising above polite tone. She ruled the Hartley ranch house the way some women ran prisons, with a ledger in one hand and a hymn on her lips. Lena's wedding had been small, set in the clearing behind the barn. No white gown, just a faded blue dress borrowed from the preacher's wife and wildflowers in her hair. Evelyn hadn't attended, though she watched from the parlor window like a crow at the edge of a battlefield. The next day, she laid out 2 place settings at breakfast. One for Jude, one for herself, none for Lena. Still, Lena had tried. She'd risen early, fed the chickens, scrubbed floors Evelyn already deemed clean enough, and folded napkins into the shape of lilies. She never expected thanks. But silence, stretched too thin, begins to bleed. 3 weeks ago, Jude had kissed her forehead, hands cupping her cheeks as if afraid she might vanish, and left on a cattle drive bound east. "I'll be back before the snow stays," he promised. "Keep the stove hot. Keep your feet warm." She'd stood in the doorway, waving until he was a speck. When she turned back, Evelyn was already rearranging the furniture. "We'll see if you know how to run a home without leaning on a man." By the end of the first week, Lena had learned how the house breathed when Jude wasn't in it. The floorboards groaned like they were whispering warnings. Evelyn never shouted, never struck. She simply erased meals without salt, conversations that ended when Lena entered, and work doled out in cruel increments. She never mentioned the baby. Neither did Lena. It had come like a secret tucked in spring wind. A missed cycle, a sudden tenderness. Lena hadn't told Jude yet, waiting for the right moment, the right warmth. She'd hidden the tiny cotton onesies she'd sewn from scraps beneath the floorboard of the pantry. Evelyn found them the day the snow came. The older woman said nothing at first, just held one between finger and thumb like it smelled of rot. Then she set it atop the burning coals of the stove, pressing it down with the poker until the fabric curled black and vanished. Lena didn't cry. She folded her hands. "I won't have you breeding weakness into this family," Evelyn said, voice smooth as polished glass. "You think a child fixes a mistake? You think being with child makes you a Hartley." "I am a Hartley," Lena whispered. Evelyn leaned in. "You wore his name like a girl wears pearls to a funeral. You don't know what it costs." "Not yet." That night, Lena sat in the root cellar with her back against the cold stone wall, hands pressed over her belly, as if she could shield the child from the malice above. The wind moaned through the beams. She prayed without words. The next morning came harsh and bright, sunlight hitting snow until it blinded. Evelyn stood by the back door, coat already on, gloves buttoned. "The shed's roof is leaking. Go check it before it caves in." Lena nodded, her breath plumed before her as she crossed the yard. The shed sat low and crooked, roof slanted like a broken smile. She stepped inside, ducking low. Tools hung from rusted nails. Feed sacks lay in piles. The cold settled over her shoulders like an unwanted shawl. Then she heard the latch. She turned. The door didn't open. A shadow shifted through the cracks. She stepped forward, rattled the handle. It didn't budge. Lena pressed her face to the seam. Mrs. Hartley? Nothing. She waited. Listened. Only wind. She tried to push the door with her shoulder, but it held fast. She reached for a broken garden hoe, trying to wedge the end between the door and frame, but the wood splintered and failed. An hour passed. Then two. The light dimmed. She wrapped herself in a sackcloth, hands pressed under her arms. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't give the cold the sound of her breaking. The chickens outside squawked. The wind howled. The snow whispered against the walls. By dusk, Lena began to speak, not in fear, but in rhythm. She told stories to the child in her belly, about spring crocuses and dew on wild sage, about a boy named Jude who once held her hand so tightly her bones remembered. She sang lullabies from her childhood, soft and strange, words half lost. My mama used to hum this one, she said to no one. She said even snow listened when it missed the sound of warmth. In the house, Evelyn poured tea. The curtains were drawn. Her knitting needles clicked. There was no mention of Lena at supper. No second place setting. And yet the shed stood visible from the kitchen window. Every time Evelyn looked up, it was there. Still locked. Still holding what she deemed a mistake. The night deepened. The cold pressed harder. Lena rocked back and forth. She thought of warm hands. Of Jude's thumb brushing the hollow behind her ear. Of the way he looked at her the morning they married, not like she was his bride, but like she was his prayer finally answered. She didn't hate Evelyn. She didn't have room for that. Hatred took heat. Lena needed every flicker to survive. She recited their wedding vows aloud, voice slow and trembling. To have and to hold in sickness and in health, till death do us part. She paused, laid her palm over her stomach. Not today, she whispered. And in the moonlight, slicing through the cracks, her breath rose like smoke from a candle that refused to die. Outside, the wind carried her vow through the drifts. Somewhere far down the road, a horse changed direction, and a man's hands tightened on the reins, unaware of the frost waiting ahead. But something in his bones ached sudden and sure, as if the one who wore his name had whispered it into the snow. The second morning came with no sunrise, only a dull gray light that seeped through the warped boards of the shed like smoke from a dying fire. Lena woke stiff, curled like a letter never sent, her joints frozen at the hinges. The sackcloth she'd used as a blanket crackled with frost. Her breath was shallow and bitter. Snow had piled at the base of the door overnight, cold as judgment. She tried to sleep with her feet near the broken tool chest, hoping the wood might hold warmth. It did not. Her fingers had turned pale and swollen, her nails bruised blue. She rubbed them slowly, rhythmically, whispering, "Come back, come back, come back," until the words became a kind of pulse, a chant stitched from memory and desperation. She stood, eventually, slow as thawing creek water. The pain in her lower back had worsened overnight, low and spreading. She didn't think it was the child, not yet. Just the body's slow protest to a world turned cruel and cold. She crossed the small shed in 5 measured steps. On the 6th, she nearly slipped on a frozen puddle, where melted snow had crept through the seams in the roof and formed a glassy patch over the dirt floor. She caught herself on a rusted rake handle, chest heaving. Outside, the wind moaned like a mourning mother. She needed water. Her lips were split, her tongue thick and sticky. The melted snow on the window ledge tasted like old dust and ash. Still, she drank it, every drop. She would not die for want of trying. In the house across the yard, Evelyn poured her tea with precision. She folded napkins. She set out 1 biscuit, 1 boiled egg. She hummed an old Methodist hymn while stirring the fire, not once glancing out the window that faced the shed. Her silence was deliberate now, weighty. She did not expect Lena to survive. That, in truth, was the point. And there was something righteous in her stillness. as if she tidied a mess no one else had the courage to confront. Lena pressed her palm to her stomach, speaking softly. "Stay still, little one. The world's got edges right now. We'll round them off later." The shed held no heat. By midday, her teeth were chattering in bursts she couldn't control. Her body trembled in waves, tight, involuntary, like grass under wind. The hammer on the wall rattled against its nail whenever she moved. She thought of unhooking it, smashing the latch, but her strength was gone. She tried last night already. The door didn't budge, and now her arms felt hollow. So she sang, not because her voice was strong, but because silence felt heavier. She sang the songs her mother used to hum when patching clothes on their cabin porch, songs made for storms and lonely days, verses about lost rivers, of lovers who returned after the frost had gone. She sang to keep her heartbeat slow, to remind her bones they belonged to something warm once. Mid-afternoon brought footsteps crunching in snow. She froze, breath caught in her chest. Was it Evelyn? Sheriff Mays? Jude? A shadow past the slats. Then a whisper. "Miss Lena?" The voice was small, unsure, familiar. Lena rushed to the crack between the boards. Dusty. The orphan boy crouched low, bundled in an oversized coat, his cheeks red from the wind. He pressed his face to the base of the wall. "You in there?" "I am," she whispered, throat cracking. "You shouldn't be out. I seen her lock you in. I told the preacher's wife. She said she'd talk to Sheriff Mays. But he ain't come yet. Brought you this." He held up a baked potato wrapped in cloth. "It's still warm. Took it from the church kitchen." Tears stung her eyes. "You brave, brave boy." He looked down, as if embarrassed. "You once gave me a biscuit when I was cold. 'Member that?" "I do. I'll come back," he said, pushing the potato through a loose board. "If she catches me, I'll say I was chasing a rabbit." Lena reached for the food. It felt like a sunrise in her palms. "You're a miracle, Dusty." He smiled, shy and missing 2 front teeth. "Ain't no miracle. Just someone who sees what's right." Then he was gone. She held the potato for a long time before eating. Let the warmth bleed into her fingers. She divided it in 2, speaking aloud again. "Half for me. Half for you, little one." And she ate slow, eyes closed, as if tasting the memory of kitchens, of Jude's hand around hers as they passed plates. That night, she didn't shake as badly. She tucked the empty cloth beneath her coat, close to her heart. Something had shifted, not the cold, but her place in it. She still feared death, but it no longer had teeth. Not with Dusty on her side. Not with a child inside her who still stirred, still waited. By dawn, the snow had deepened. Wind had blown drifts against the door high enough to block most of the light. Her breath came slower now. Her bones ached, but her mind felt clearer. Her thoughts no longer scattered. They ran toward memory, toward Jude. She pictured his walk, deliberate, shoulders back, hat tipped low. The way his jaw flexed when he was afraid and trying to look brave. How he once carried her over a muddy creek without saying a word, just grinned after like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come home," she whispered. "Just come home." Another day passed. Dusty returned just before sunset, slipping under the fence and crawling behind the shed. He had bread this time, and an apple, bruised but sweet. "Sheriff Mays looked at the house," he said. "He was watching. I think he knows." "Be careful," she told him. "If she sees you." Dusty shrugged. "Can't be worse than being left to freeze." She reached out, touched his mittened hand through the crack. "You matter more than you think." He smiled again. "You're different than the other ladies. You talk like your voice has roots." That night, she held onto that line as tightly as she held the bread against her ribs. She dreamed of roots, of tree limbs curling around her like arms, of Jude's voice calling her name through snow she could not see through. But the next morning, Dusty didn't come, and that was worse than any cold. She waited, counting heartbeats, straining to hear his little feet. Nothing came, only wind and the sharp cry of a raven overhead. Her stomach turned with panic, not hunger. What if Evelyn had caught him? What if no one believed him? She pressed her ear to the wall and tried to pray. The words came in fragments now, half memories. A mother's hand brushing her hair. A scrap of psalm. Jude's breath in her ear. "We'll make it, little bird. I promise." Evening came. No Dusty. She began to hum again, but her throat was dry and raw. The songs came out broken. The bruises on her fingers had spread. Her legs felt far away, numb from thigh to heel. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, distant and fading. She curled against the wall, pressing her cheek to the wood. "Come back," she whispered. "Please come back." But no one did. That night, the storm rose again, this time fiercer. Snow screamed across the yard, drowning the shed in drifts. In the kitchen, Evelyn sat by the fire, sipping broth, flipping a page in her worn Bible. Her face remained impassive, save a brief flinch when the wind howled too loud. At midnight, a knock sounded at her door. She froze, then stood. Another knock, heavy, measured. She crossed the parlor, opening the door an inch. Sheriff Mays stood on the porch, soaked in snow, hat in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Hartley." She did not smile. "Sheriff, cold out tonight." "It is." He nodded, slow. "I'd like to come in, just for a moment." She hesitated, opened the door wider. As he stepped inside, his eyes flicked to the second chair. Still gone. To the hearth, where only one cup steamed. To the window, where the shed was barely visible, buried under snow. He didn't speak of Lena. Not yet. But Evelyn's knuckles had gone white on her mug. Outside, beyond the reach of firelight, Lena lay still. She thought of Dusty's smile, of Jude's hands, of music sung by a throat now dry. And even as the cold licked at her bones, something inside her refused to fade. Because kindness, once sparked, doesn't die easy. It roots deep, even in frozen ground. The wind changed before the town did. A sharp shift in the air, brittle and scented with pine smoke and unease. The sky hung low for days, clouds pressed like a lid over the world. And beneath that lid, whispers began to stir. At the general store, it started with Mrs. Whitmore asking if anyone had seen Lena Grace lately. "Sweet thing," she said, bagging flour into muslin. "Always polite, never loud. Bit pale, but that's how the Hartley women come, I suppose." No one had seen her. The preacher's wife frowned. "Didn't she sew the altar cloth for Easter?" She was light with a needle. "Haven't seen her since Jude left." "She might be resting," someone suggested. Newlywed women go soft for a bit, especially when the husband's away. But then Dusty limped into town. His cheek was mottled with a bruise, an ugly sweep of purple blooming along the curve of his eye. He wouldn't say where it came from, just stared down at his boots, and said he slipped near the Hartley place. His coat was too big again. He'd traded the church's nicer one for his freedom. Miss Hattie, who taught Sunday school, crouched beside him on the chapel steps and said, "Where'd you get that bruise, little man?" Dusty shrugged. "Ain't important." But later, when she handed him a bun and a blanket, he whispered, "She's still out there. Miss Lena. In the shed. Locked up." She went still. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He looked up, lips trembling. "She's real cold, ma'am. I brought her food. But then Evelyn saw me. Said I was trespassing. Said she'd skin me if I spoke again." That night, Hattie spoke to her husband, the preacher. He went to Sheriff Mays. Mays already suspected something. He'd driven past the Hartley place more than once and noticed the lack of footprints, the odd way Evelyn moved behind her windows like a woman expecting judgment. But this was more. He didn't rush. He was a careful man, shaped by dry years and broken promises. He rode out the next morning, slow, coat pulled tight, rifle strapped across his saddle more for show than need. The snow crackled beneath his mare's hooves like old parchment tearing. Evelyn met him at the door, composed, with a handkerchief folded just so in her apron. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. "Sheriff, to what do I owe the honor?" "Just making my rounds," he said. "Heard tell Lena went to visit kin." "That's so." She needed air. "Too soft for ranch life, I'm afraid." He looked past her. The parlor was spotless. No second boots by the door. No shawl on the hook, where Lena always left hers. "Mind if I come in?" gets bitter up this way. Her lips tightened, just a notch. Of course. He stepped inside, removed his hat, and let the silence do its work. The fire crackled low. A single chair by the hearth. One cup. The faint scent of lavender soap, familiar but faint. She leave anything behind? He asked casually. Clothes? Letter. Didn't take much with her. Traveled light. And where's her family live? Evelyn paused. South. South where? Texas. He nodded, watching her face. Peculiar, that. Texas folks usually write a letter ahead. Maybe they did. I might check the telegraph just in case, he said gently. Make sure all's well. She didn't answer. Just offered more tea, which he refused. He didn't press further, but when he left, he lingered by the shed on his way out, slowing his horse. The snow there was untouched. Not a single drag mark, not even where wind should have pressed flakes against the door. And there, barely visible under the eave, a red ribbon, half-frozen, stiff with ice. He dismounted, pocketed it. He said nothing to Evelyn. But the next day, town began to stir. Dusty's bruise had bloomed dark. Lena's absence stretched longer. Hattie whispered to the miller's wife, who passed it to the butcher's daughter. And by supper the air was thick with worry. No one dared confront Evelyn outright. She was a widow, after all, a Hartley, and the town had long learned to mind its own fences. But minds were changing. The preacher said a few careful words at Sunday service. Let us pray for those in unseen places, those weathering storms not of their making. People looked around. Some looked toward the empty pew where Lena once sat, quiet and folded. Evelyn attended service, chin high, gloves white as snow. She said nothing. Neither did Sheriff Mays, but he stood at the back that day, arms crossed, watching her the way lawmen watch wolves who smile too easily. Miles away, Jude Hartley broke from the cattle trail 2 days early. He'd made good time, faster than expected, though the drive had been hard and one horse lame. He'd woken 3 nights in a row with a cold sweat and Lena's name half-spoken. He thought maybe it was just longing or guilt for leaving her under his mother's roof. But something inside him, deep in the gut where men hold their warnings, twisted like rope under strain. He rode hard, through sleet and silence, until the land he knew came into view. The valley dipped just right. The chimney smoke curled like it used to. The trees leaned like old friends. As he neared, something struck him wrong. No second smoke trail. Lena always lit the kitchen stove separate from the parlor. No boot prints near the porch. No bundles of wood stacked fresh. The chickens weren't clucking, and the sled Lena used to drag feed was half buried near the barn, unmoved for days. He dismounted. The front door creaked as he stepped in. His mother stood in the kitchen, startled but not afraid. You're home early. Where is she? Evelyn's smile faltered. She left. Couldn't bear the cold. Said she was going south. Jude stared at her. No letter, he said flatly. She didn't write one. She wouldn't leave without a note. She was weak, Evelyn said, voice tight now. She didn't belong here. And she wasn't right in the head. Thought I'd poison the food, the silly thing. His fists clenched. And you let her go? I didn't stop her. He took one step forward, then another. What did you do? Her eyes flicked toward the parlor. The fire there had burned too hot, logs cracked sharp. Then Dusty appeared on the porch. His coat was torn, his face bruised, lips cracked. She's in the shed, he said, voice trembling. She's still alive. Or she was. Jude turned. No hesitation. He ran. The snow was knee-deep now. The drifts had covered the lower half of the shed door. He slammed into it, shoulder first, roaring her name. Lena. From inside, a sound. So faint he almost didn't hear it. He yanked at the latch. It didn't budge. He drove his boot into it once, twice, 3 times. The wood cracked, then splintered. He forced the door open and staggered inside. Lena lay huddled beneath a feed sack, barely breathing, lips bloodless. Her eyes fluttered, then opened. She saw him. Her mouth shaped his name, but no sound came. He dropped to his knees and gathered her into his arms like something precious and breaking. Her body was light, too light. You came, she rasped. I'm here, he whispered, pressing her to his chest. "I'm here, Lena." She wept then, silent, saltless tears on skin too cold to feel them. Behind them, the wind shrieked. And in the kitchen, Evelyn stared into her tea, unblinking. Sheriff Mays arrived just past dusk. He didn't knock, just stepped in, found Evelyn seated stiff at the table. "I'll be taking you into town." She said nothing. Got a room at the jail. Warm. Quiet. Still, she said nothing. The sheriff didn't gloat. He just cuffed her wrists with practiced hands. Outside, the sky cracked open and dropped new snow, covering old sins. And in the shed, Jude carried Lena out into the night, whispering her name like a man who'd been underwater too long and had just found air. Jude carried Lena across the frozen yard like a man bearing scripture, careful, reverent, breathless with belief. The snow clawed at his boots, slowing every step, but he didn't falter. Her head lolled against his chest, hair stiff with ice, body barely stirring. Her skin was so cold it burned through his shirt. He didn't speak, just held her closer, as if his arms alone could thaw her, restore what had been stolen. Inside the house, the fire still crackled, indifferent. Evelyn's teacup sat untouched on the table, steam curling faintly in the air like a soul departing. He crossed the threshold without a word to his mother. She followed him with her eyes, but did not speak, did not rise. Jude pushed through to the back bedroom, the one he and Lena had shared. He hadn't seen it since he left. It was colder than it should have been, the stove there unlit, the bed stripped bare. He laid her down on the mattress, the rough ticking pressing against her bones. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you now, darling. Just stay with me." He moved fast, pulled quilts from the chest, wrapped her in layer after layer, lit the stove, his fingers clumsy with urgency. He stripped off his coat and climbed in beside her, pressing his warmth against her chilled body. Her breath was shallow, but steadying. Her lips moved, dry and cracked. "You came back." "I never stopped coming," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I just didn't know how bad it was." She blinked slowly. "I didn't break." "No," he said fiercely. "You didn't." He held her through the night, rubbing her arms, whispering stories. The heat from the stove grew, filled the room, turned frost to mist on the glass. He coaxed sips of warm broth between her lips, spoon by spoon, hour by hour. Evelyn never came in. By morning, Lena's voice returned, soft and rasped. "The baby." He pressed his hand gently to her stomach. "Still there," he said. "Still hanging on, same as you." She closed her eyes and wept, not from pain, but from the shock of stillness, the terrible mercy of being safe. Later that morning, Sheriff Mays returned with 2 townsfolk, Hattie and the preacher's wife. They entered quietly, their faces carved with sorrow. Evelyn sat in the parlor like a figure from a painting, upright and distant, already halfway vanished. Mays approached her without ceremony. "You'll come with me now." She didn't protest, didn't plead, just nodded and rose, smoothing her skirt with stiff fingers. When she passed Lena's room, she did not look in. She left like a woman taking her last breath in a place that never gave her peace. As the door shut behind her, something in the house changed. Not loudly, but profoundly. A weight shifted. A silence ended. The walls exhaled. Lena didn't ask where Evelyn was going. She just stared at the ceiling, Jude's hand wrapped around hers like an oath renewed. "I thought I died in there," she said. "You didn't," he replied. "You lived, Lena. You lived. I prayed you'd hear me. Through the cold, through the snow." "I did," he said softly. "Some part of me did. I just didn't understand what it meant. Not till I saw the door and heard nothing behind it." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Will people believe me?" He kissed her fingers. "They already do." News traveled fast. By the second day, women brought soup, blankets, and gentle words. No one asked for details. They came bearing warmth, not just in their hands, but in the way they looked at Lena now, as though they saw her as she truly was, a woman who had endured more than frost, more than cruelty. A woman who'd lived through deliberate silence and come out speaking. Jude stayed at her side. He didn't hover, he honored. He fetched firewood, watched over her through fevers and trembling spells, held her when nightmares took her breath. He read aloud from her mother's Bible, not because he believed every word, but because it made her hand still. He pressed his ear to her belly and whispered things only the unborn could hear, promises mostly, that he'd build a better home, that the world could be made kind, one beam at a time. One evening, as the first true thaw began, Lena sat in a chair by the window. She wore a shawl someone had knitted and a new pair of slippers. Her cheeks had regained color. The bruises on her hands were fading, bones no longer sharp beneath the skin. She watched the snow melt in slow rivulets from the fence, watched the shed stand crooked and empty in the distance, its door now hanging open. "Burn it," she said, voice quiet but sure. Jude turned from the hearth. "You sure?" "I don't want it rebuilt. I want the land back. Let the wind take it." He nodded. That night, the townsfolk gathered as Jude lit the flame. The shed went up fast, drywood crackled, old shame rising in sparks. Lena watched from the porch, one hand on her stomach, the other curled around Dusty's fingers. The boy leaned against her hip, quiet and warm. "You're real brave," she said. Dusty shrugged. "Just didn't want you dying." Still brave. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Are you going to name the baby?" "I am." "Can it be after me?" She smiled. "Only if you keep visiting." "Deal." The fire burned down to ashes. The next day, Jude took an axe to the door of the shed, split it in two, and used the wood to build shelves in the nursery. Lena helped him sand each piece smooth. She didn't want it gone. She wanted it transformed. Spring came slow, like a breath returning. Lena walked the property with Jude most mornings. Her body still ached, but she bore it like one bears a scar earned in battle. She was changed, not weaker, more real. Her silences now held depth, not fear. Her words landed soft but solid. She spoke with Dusty's new schoolteacher about taking the boy in come harvest. She planted violets beneath the window. She wrote her sister a letter saying only, "I made it through the frost. Tell Mama her lullabies stayed with me." One night, Jude knelt beside her and placed her hand over his heart. "I failed you once. Let me be better from now on." "You didn't fail," she whispered. "You came back. I should have seen it sooner." "You did," she said, "when it mattered." He kissed her palm. She leaned into his chest. And as the moon rose over the fields, they stood like two roots finally joined, warm and unwithered. The baby was born that summer, a girl, with her mother's eyes and her father's hands. They named her Mercy. And in time, Lena sang again, not to keep death away, but to celebrate the ones who stayed. Songs about firewood stacked high, about boys with bruised cheeks who brought hope through snow. Songs about forgiveness that didn't erase pain, but honored it. The town never spoke Evelyn's name again, but they spoke Lena's, in hushed, reverent tones, not as victim, as proof that a woman raised in silence could still bloom when seen, that survival could be more than breath, it could be transformation, and sometimes the coldest winters make the strongest roots. So if you pass a house where violets grow in spring and laughter warms the porch, stop and listen. You might hear her humming. You might remember, there was a shed once, but it did not hold her. It only made room for who she became.